He is a radio giant. He is heard on Sirius XM Pac-12 radio. Also dabbles into other broadcasting endeavors with PFL, the Pro Fight League. He is a broadcaster there. It is the great Sean O'Connell, found on Twitter at Real OC Sports, and we're going to talk about his career. It is very interesting, with a whole lot of different stories that he has from these experiences that are going to come to be interesting to all of you. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. And Sean, I know you have this big MMA background, so I wanted to ask you about that. But to start up here, what was the first fight you ever won growing up when you had to stand up for yourself?
Wow, that's a really great question. Man, I'm sure that my opponent might debate who won the fight, but when I was when I was in third grade, we were playing basketball at my house, just on the hoop on the side of the house, and these kids from up the street were they were playing with us, and as it happens when young boys are playing basketball against one another, got a little bit testy. And yeah, this kid who was a couple years older than me, Jesse Evans, um, he and I got into it, and his friend and my older brother got into it, and we were all just kind of wrestling around on the grass and the ground. And yeah, that was probably the first time that I was like, oh, hey, I'm pretty tough, because that guy's 2 years older than me, and I still won. I think I won, or at least it was like a draw. But I was like, I was the youngest kid there, so I was like, yeah, I'm tough, okay. But that might not even be true. Who knows?
How therapeutic is the act of fighting in MMA for you?
Well, the act itself is probably less therapeutic. It's the training that's the therapeutic thing. The ability to go, when you're actually being consistent, and every single day get whatever frustration and physical aggression that might be built up in a normal person's life, to just be able to get that out is, I mean, that's a big deal, right? That's something that I think everyone else kind of misses out on. And I would like to encourage people to, like, if you never have any intention of fighting ever, that's totally fine with me. But you should potentially try and, go train, take some jujitsu, go to a kickboxing class, hit some pads, whatever it is, because that's the therapeutic part of it, is that sort of zen like thing you get from any workout, the endorphins you get from any workout. But it's the natural, release of aggression, and it's a very constructive and healthy way to do it, because you're not taking any frustration out on someone weaker than you, or someone who hasn't consented to be part of that combat experience. So it's therapeutic in that regard.
What were those frustrated moments that you were able to release thanks to fighting and getting that stuff out, and which is super healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me a big part of it was I had a very unsatisfying college football career. Football was my whole life growing up, and in high school a lot of my identity was based around, like, being one of the better guys on the team and stuff. And I got to college and I just bit off more than I can chew. I probably should have gone to a small school from the start, and I was playing on a team that had a bunch of future NFL guys, right? I was at Utah with Alex Smith and Chris Kemoyatu and Eric Weddle, and these dudes who were like, I mean, freaks. Arguably, at least one of them is a future Hall of Famer, right? So I probably overestimated my abilities as an 18-year-old, which I think a lot of 18-year-olds do. And because of that, I had a kind of a 4-year frustration built up with college football not being what I wanted. And MMA became an outlet for that. Martial arts became an outlet for that, because not only was it just like expelling that negative energy, but also I was good at it. And it was something that kind of replaced, well, the sense of accomplishment I was looking for in college football. So it was a double-edged sword for me, but that was a big part of that early experience.
And then how does broadcasting help build up that validation that, like you said, you might not have gotten that recognition playing college football, but here's broadcasting. And what has that done to add to what you didn't necessarily get that you should have gotten or would have liked to have gotten in college?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, broadcasting is like any activity that people find a talent in or find an affinity for. When you're good at something or you get positive feedback for something, right? That's validation. That's something that if you, especially if it's something you enjoy and it's something you're passionate about, which I very obviously am about sports, and people are like, yeah, you know what? I like hearing your thoughts on it. And also you're funny, or you bring an interesting perspective because of what you went through as an athlete and what you went, and so that's validation that you get from people you care about, people you love, and also from total strangers, and both are meaningful in their own ways. So that was broadcasting is
We still have a couple more
probably
ways on.
overly dependent on that
Yeah.
validation from others, right? Where you're just like, you're like reliant on what other people are saying about you sometimes, to like what your ratings say about you, what your audience says about you, the feedback you get. But in all, it's pretty rewarding as long as you're enjoying it and you're doing it for the right reasons, to then hear other people say, driving into work or driving home from work, you make my day better because that joke was awesome, or that interview you did was really insightful, or whatever. So yeah, it's a pretty validating career for not it being a very serious job.
Yeah, I can really see how you've made up for yourself in terms of what you didn't get in college. And now you are filling those vacancies as far as your desires to be validated in the next chapter of your life. We're joined by Sean O'Connell of Sirius XM Pac-12 Radio and with PFL, broadcaster extraordinaire. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. What sort of meaningful conversations you speak about how you're able to give meaning to people and you feel meaning as a broadcaster and being entertaining and being informative and telling good stories? What sort of impact do you think you've rubbed off on with Jeff Schwartz and your show together on Pac-12 Radio?
Man, I don't know if I've had any positive impact on Jeff Schwartz at all. He's a guy. Look, he's been successful at everything he's ever done. He's a super solid guy. Got a great family. Great relationship with his wife. Awesome kids. He had a successful NFL career, and an unlikely success, I should say, in the NFL. Right? He wasn't like a super high prospect coming out of college at the University of Oregon, and he played 8-9 years in the league, and if it weren't for injuries, he probably would have played longer, right? I think that Jeff and I feed off of each other pretty well. I think that he's a pretty dominant personality, and I think it takes someone like me to be able to push back on that a little bit, and then it gets, because I can ask him, "Are you sure?" Or like, "All right, I know that you have this expertise, but shouldn't we also look at it this way?" And he's able to do that with me as well. So I think that if there's any really positive impact with Jeff, it's that we have comparably sized egos that neither of us can really trample on one another, and that's why the show's cohesive and good.
Have you gotten revenge yet? And if so, how? From when he pointed out that you were sniffing your armpits, and he brought this up on Zoom and made everybody know about it.
I haven't gotten revenge. I will find some way. Yeah. You forget you're on a Zoom meeting, and I did the little smell check. Like everyone does it, right? Like, and he laughs because he's like, dude, that we saw that. And I'm like, man, I got to remember that people can see this stuff. But yeah, I haven't been able to call him out for something, not publicly at least. And you know what? This might be my revenge, because one thing, I love Jeff. He's really awesome to work with. But we wear headset mics like the one you've got on now. And in breaks and stuff, if he's having something to eat or if he's taking a drink, Jeff cannot drink without it sounding like he's drowning. It's the loudest, most absurd. And if he's eating something, it's like, are you deliberately chomping on that to try and make it as loud as possible? It's actually hilarious. And so we've we've worked out a system where he takes his headset off or he mutes his mic most of the time when he's going to have a bite or a drink, because Bryan, I cannot express to you how insanely loud his consumption of food and beverage is. It's wild.
Well, you know what's interesting, Sean, and obviously I agree with you. Jeff is so awesome, and he's such a funny guy. He's so comedic as well, and he often will fill in during the weekdays for Clay Travis on Fox Sports Radio, and occasionally I'll get to fill in as his update anchor. And there was one time he was in for Clay where he had this tirade where he was vowing for every male to get a urinal at their house because he has one, and it's just it's the most wonderful thing because his wife doesn't have to worry about him missing the seat. So I think he's just so funny, and you know that, Sean, and so it's so neat to hear how you guys have really developed that chemistry. What is the strongest take you've ever made on the radio show talking anything Pac-12 related?
Ooh, that's a good question. My strongest take about the Pac-12 or Pac-12 related, man, I think that if we go back far enough, I predicted that Utah would be in a Pac-12 championship game before anyone else believed in them. Now, in hindsight, a lot of folks look at it and it was like, oh, yeah, of course, that's a well-respected program. Of course, Kyle Whittingham's consistent. He's been there forever. But because I'm closer to that program, living in Salt Lake City and having gone to school there and knowing some of the coaches and stuff, I recognized that, like, oh, my gosh, this 2018 team is as talented as we've ever seen at the University of Utah. So they're going to be a championship contender. And then, they went to back-to-back championships. They didn't win either of them. At the time, it was considered probably a strong take, right? In 2019, the coaches in the conference kind of knew. They were like, oh my gosh, this is a good team. Like, let's vote them in. But the year before that, people were like, whoa, I don't really know about this. So that was probably considered a strong take. For me, it was a fairly obvious one. And then, we're not really hot take kind of guys on a lot of the Pac-12 stuff because you gotta avoid burning bridges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a great point. When you were at Utah and you were teammates with, you were talking about Alex Smith, what is the best story involving you and Alex Smith that you can recall? Something in your interactions with him?
I only think it's a great story because I don't get embarrassed about things. Alex probably, he's had such a successful career. I'm sure he wouldn't remember this, but it was shortly after we had finished our regular season. Okay. So Alex and company, I was basically a non-player on that team, just a practice squad guy, if that such a thing existed in college. And we had just beat BYU, the in-state rival, right? Secure the Mountain West championship, secure a trip to the BCS, first time that a mid-major school had ever busted into the BCS system, undefeated regular season. And Alex does this really great, like, post-game interview, not immediately on the field, but after the fact, right? And all of us were listening to what he said. And then we all go into the training room, everyone's cutting tape off and stuff like that. And everyone's, just a celebratory mood. And I was like, Alex, what the hell, man? And he's like, what? I'm like, you just did like a 20-minute interview. You never once mentioned the great looks that the scout team is giving you at practice. You never once gave us credit. And he just looked at me with like we weren't close enough friends for him to realize I was 100% kidding, I guess. And he was just like, what the hell are you talking about? And I cracked up, and then he eventually kind of caught on. But I still just remember the look on his face where he was like, this scrub really thinks that in the biggest moment of our program's history, I should have given him credit. And I didn't actually think he should have given me credit, but I called him out for it. And his reaction was priceless. I wish I had it on tape.
I would love to see that on tape if you did have it. Final question. We're joined by Sean OConnell. Sean, thanks so much again for a couple moments of your time. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at FSR. What's the angriest you ever saw Urban Meyer as far as getting into somebody and really trying to get his player to get with the program, so to speak, and to learn something?
Oh my gosh. So one of the things that I think people who have played in a program coached by Urban will universally be able to tell you, but that the public might not fully appreciate or know, because he's he's so intelligent, he's so charismatic, he's so adept at knowing the situation he's in and controlling himself based on those situations, that like the Urban behind closed doors, the Urban coaching on the field when there's cameras there, and the Urban coaching in front of cameras, they're all different. Wow. Right? And that's a skill. And there was a practice where one guy who was kind of a highly touted prospect who never really lived up to his potential, it was like maybe the moment when everyone realized he wasn't going to live up to his potential, because this kid had all the raw abilities in the world, and he just, for whatever reason, he couldn't focus, or he wasn't mentally, prepared to handle the defensive calls, and we're running plays, and he kept doing the same thing wrong over and over and over again. And for Urban, all of us ran afoul of this a time or two, where like if you interrupt his practice plan because you're the one who screwed up the rep, and you start to get behind and it's your fault, the wrath of God is less frightening than Urban Meyer in those moments, right? So this individual kind of screws everything up over and over and over again, and he's not given proper effort, and he's not taking proper instruction, and there's no reporters at practice yet to cover the last 30 minutes or whatever, and this dude just unloads. Like, Urban just tore him a new one verbally, just up and down. He's just like, just quit. Just get off the field. I have never seen anyone do something so poorly so many times in a row. Just like eviscerates this man verbally.
Wow.
And like, to his credit, the player just kind of took the punishment and just took the abuse and then ran wherever Urban told him to run. But it was a 6-minute tirade of death coming from a head coach. He was livid. I mean, he's the opposite of that like really put together sharp guy that you see on the broadcast, and obviously that has really helped him cultivate this image as a prime recruiter and all this stuff. It was insane, and all of us laugh about it now, but he looked like he was trying to get the guy to quit football, and maybe he almost did.
Well, it is going to be so interesting to see if he changes up his motivational tactics in the NFL. If players could take that sort of just hard pressed in your face, like get with it sort of mentality, or if he's going to back off a little bit, we're going to find out. Sean, you're going to certainly be talking about it, I'm sure. Sean OConnell, thank you so much with Sirius XM Pac-12 Radio, and of course, doing all sorts of work with PFL, which is where you are now getting ready for a big event. So you got something big coming up, don't you?
That's right. Friday night, ESPN Plus and ESPN2. And then the 2 following Thursdays. We're just starting off season 3. It's going to be really exciting. Professional Fighters League. It's a regular season, playoffs, and a championship. The real sports format for the sport of mixed martial arts. If you haven't checked this out, please do. ESPN Plus and ESPN2 all year long. Easy to find the schedule. And obviously, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, Sean, it's been an honor to have you. Hopefully our paths will continue to cross. And yes, everybody, whether you're listening or watching this, go check out Sean and his work with PFL. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at FSR. Sean, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.